It's a John Mulaney joke. You won't get it. Anyway, that's how bored I am. Welcome back to Introduction to Philosophy. Maybe you never left. Maybe you're watching this right after the previous video. Maybe you can't leave. Can you? No. I can't. I'm here all the time. Day blends into night, blends into day. Is there a world outside? I don't know. I'm hoping you're well. And I'm hoping that you will continue to watch these videos so that you can chronicle my degeneration in real time. Someday these will make up part of a found footage horror movie. Anyway, we're going to continue talking about normative ethics. I'm sure I'll come up with a nice little graphic for this. I have colleagues who are doing things with like entire intro sequences and music and credits and stuff. I'm not doing that. I'm not that bored yet. I've got other things to do. I got role-playing games to work on, pal.
Yeah.
That was a firmly stated opinion. As you can tell, my lovely assistant Kimmy is here again to help us out by pretending to be you. She's done careful research on all your backgrounds and family members and places of employment. No, I'm kidding.
I can barely put in the effort to be me.
That's true. Sometimes she forgets to be her, and she's just a random person. It's weird. I miss you all. I love hearing from you guys by email or the discussion boards. Please use the discussion boards, if only so I know you're alive. There's a lot going on out there, and I'm a worrier by nature. So it reassures me when you chime in, even if you don't say much, because then I know that you or someone with your passwords is still out there. And that's enough for me. A very peculiar theory of identity, anyone with your passwords is you. Now, stop that. Okay. Yeah, spray bottle's coming out. I'm telling you. Anyway, for today's lesson, we're going to talk about deontology. We talked about virtue theory last time and covered it pretty thoroughly, I think. I know you probably all have some questions still, and that's fine. As I mentioned in the announcement, I'm going to try and schedule a live thing on Thursday, maybe. Figure out what I'm going to do. I'm going to do Zoom or do a live thing on YouTube. I'm not sure which. But something, I've had several people contact me saying they want some kind of real-time interaction so that they can ask questions, and I get that. Until then, please use the discussion boards to ask questions. I can respond to you there. Anyway, we're going to talk about deontology, which is the second of the big three theories. We're going to talk about deontology today. I'm going to have a separate video on Kant's deontology specifically because his is very difficult. It's difficult but very elegant once you get it. But getting it is the hard part. So we're going to get to that next time. We're just going to focus on deontology more generally this time.
You're not going to make them read Kant, are you?
No. I have a pledge. I will never make you read Kant as an undergraduate. You can read someone else talking about Kant, but I will never make an undergraduate read Kant.
Thank God.
It's just, no, I made that promise to myself when I started teaching.
Because reading about Kant is confusing enough.
Yeah, reading about Kant is confusing enough. Reading Kant is, I had a professor who, for a Kant seminar, whose specialty was Kant. He went to Harvard, and on the first day of that seminar, he said, reading Kant is pain and damage. And this is what he does by choice. And he thought it was terrible. So, yeah, no. Anyway. Alright, so deontology. Deontology is another class of normative ethical theories that are focused on acts rather than agents. The last time we talked about virtue theory, and we discussed the fact that virtue theories, broadly speaking, are united, despite their different content on what counts as virtuous. They are united by a common orientation towards the agent. What does it take to be a good person? And most of them, or all virtue theories, although they put forth different ideas of which habits you have to develop, come back with an answer that you have to develop certain patterns of behavior. You have to be brave and generous and socially engaged or whatever, if you're into Aristotelian virtue theory, or meek and humble and what have you if you're into Christian virtue theory, or selfish if you're Ayn Rand, in Randian virtue theory, whatever. But it's talking about patterns of behavior, not about specific actions. Deontology differs, and any theory that can be described as a deontological theory differs in proposing that the focus of a moral theory must be on actions, certain types of actions. If you follow this rule, you've done good. If you don't follow the rule, you've done bad, and that's just how that works. Deontology is generally conflated with moral theories that focus on rule following, and that's, for the purposes of an intro philosophy class, that's an accurate enough representation. That's fine. So, since they focus on rules, they're talking about actions. The actions are what's important. It's not so much whether you have made a habit of being generous. Maybe you are in most of your life a selfish person. That doesn't matter. At any moment, you can switch, and at any moment you might do the right thing by taking an action that is, say, generous, if that was one of our rules, that you shouldn't be selfish, let's say. You could at any moment do the right thing. Actions are the primary bearers of the label good or bad in the moral sense. Okay, so that is the general picture of a deontological moral theory. It means a list of rules, certain actions that you must or must not take.
Is there room for a motive in this, or is it just about following the rules?
There can be room for motive. It depends on your theory. Now, adding motive, though, really complicates deontology. And some would say that it's not... that it's not really that deontological theories that try to incorporate motive aren't really are trying to have their cake and eat it too, although I know you hate that expression, are trying to do two things that are contradictory. Let me back up for a second and address the motive issue, because this is a great question. So, in virtue theory, in Aristotle's virtue theory in particular, you have to, when you're doing something virtuous, when you are to be considered a virtuous person, you have to not only do the things that are virtuous, be brave, be generous, whatever. You have to know that you're doing them, so you can't run into battle not realizing that the enemy is over there. Like, you think you're escaping, right? I'm going to get away, right? Oh, it's like he ran into battle. Let's all follow that brave man. Yeah, no, you don't count as brave at that point. And you must be doing it for the right reason. if you're only being brave to impress someone, what happens when that person goes away or dies or doesn't care anymore? Then you're not brave. And if your brave, quote unquote, bravery is entirely motivated by that sort of external factor, then it's not really bravery. So motive figures in heavily to virtue theory, of course. You have to be acting, because virtue theory is concerned with what kind of person you are. In its most basic form, deontology is only concerned with whether you're following the rules or not. And it makes sense that deontological moral theories are sort of the oldest moral theories, right? Because they're the least psychologically sophisticated. It's just about rule following. And later, as we gained as a species, as we gained a deeper sense of psychology and human nature, and we started to care about why people get things, right? It wasn't enough to simply follow the rules. We wanted people to follow the rules for the right reasons. And Kant, for instance, Kant is a deontologist. He may be the most famous example of a deontological moral theory, but Kant cares about motive. You can't have a corrupt motive for doing the right thing. You must do the right thing for the right reasons. And yeah, that is, you can kind of say it's a two-part rule then. Like you must, I don't know, you must not steal, and you must not steal because you know it's wrong, and not just because you think you might get caught. Maybe the rule is, there's a rule about not stealing, and then there's a further rule about why you follow that rule.
Like if one guy gives $1 million to a hospital because it's a good tax write-off,
right?
And another guy gives $1 million to a hospital because they saved his kid and he wants to save other people's kids.
Right. Yes. Yes. Kant is very big on corrupt motivations and how you can't have them. But this has been criticized as weakening his commitment to deontology, because in a sense what he's advocating is a kind of virtue-ish or virtue-flavored deontology. Now with extra virtue. Deontology. New and improved deontology. Now with virtue bursts in every bite, or virtue chips, or whatever. I don't know how to put it, but it does seem like that, right? It does seem like he can't decide whether he wants a virtue theory or a deontology. But we'll get back into that. Kant may have a way out of it, Kant specifically. Other deontologies would have to address this individually, and I'm not sure all of them can. But, so generally speaking, though, it's not required of a deontology that it have any concern for motive. A deontology can still be a fully valid deontological moral theory with no concern for motive. It just may not be as appealing to us. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Good deal. All right, so now, deontology does not necessarily, we might say, all right, why deontology? Why should I buy this, right? Well, why should I believe that deontology is the correct theory rather than one of the others? Consequentialism or virtue theory? Well, we haven't talked about consequentialism, so you don't have any data there. Virtue theory may or may not have convinced you. Fine. Deontology suffers from a lot of the same epistemic and ontological problems that virtue theory does. So the first thing to note, and I say that a lot, I've noticed, watching my own videos has taught me that I say the first thing to note, or it's important to note. I note things. I note a lot of things. I'm a noter. I'm a notary public. No, I'm not. That's actually a thing, and I'm not one of them. But I am a person who notes frequently and can't get my pipe to stay lit, which is weird because that only happens to me when I'm recording videos, and I don't know why.
That's a lie.
No, I mean, that's true. It is a lie, but it happens a lot and specifically when I'm recording videos. It's annoying. So anyway, so Exsuckers can the same, this is my shank brush. Exsuckers can the same epistemic and ecological problems that virtue theory does. Actions are the bearers of moral properties. An action is good or bad. Okay, now, actions, like objects, can bear properties. We talked about this in the first video that I made. Actions, like objects, can bear properties. For instance, a certain action may be illegal, or a certain action may be rude, or what have you. And like any other sort of proposition about anything, saying it's rude to address your professor as, hey, shithead, that is, what are the truth makers for that proposition? Why is that proposition true? What kinds of facts designate that as a true proposition? Well, the social facts, right? This is obviously a case where social facts are the truth makers for that proposition. Same thing with it's illegal to rush into a store and fill your pockets with candy from the checkout aisle and run out without paying for it. Just hypothetically. No reason. I picked that. Social facts make that proposition true. And so we can have propositions about the properties, the value properties of actions. So it's not irrational, it's not incoherent to say that an action could be morally good or bad. If you're hearing like thumping in the background, those are the cats playing. I wish you could see it. It's cute. It's not irrational or unreasonable to say that actions have properties or have value properties. An action could, in theory, be morally good or bad. But we would be stuck with the same questions we ask about virtue theory. What are the truth makers for that? Where would moral goodness and badness be located as properties? What's their metaphysical nature? Aristotle solved it by claiming there was a teleology for the entire universe. And there was a telos to each and every object. And so he was able to lean on the concept of excellence, of arete in Greek, and that anything should obviously want to be, if it had the choice, it's better for something to be a better version of what it is, rather than a worse version of what it is. Now, interestingly enough, I think it's possible to engage with that. I think it's possible to ask whether or not it is irrational to want to be a less good version of a human if you're human. I think there's room to engage with that. But we'll assume for the moment Aristotle was right, and that if you're human, it's only rational to want to be a better version of a human. Anyway. That was how virtue theory resolved it. Deontology doesn't get to lean on that because actions are not natural kinds in the way that like humans, horses, the natural kinds, the natural existing sorts of things in the world. Actions are not natural kinds in and of themselves. They have no essence in the Aristotelian sense. So there would be no way to be a better or worse version of an action in the sense that Aristotle would have wanted. Now, obviously, it's true that some actions can have better or worse versions. A better or worse golf swing, sure, is an example. Golf swing is an action, and a better or worse version would probably be assessed by some sense of what it's supposed to look like. But what is it supposed to look like? Honestly, that's arbitrary. It's just like, I guess the best example of this would be like judges who grade like figure skaters or gymnasts, right? They are literally grading actions on whether they are better or worse versions of the kind of action in question. Is this a good front flip? Is that a good triple axel? Or are you a good triple axel or a bad triple axel? Sorry, that's a Wizard of Oz joke. Anyway, that won't make any sense unless you've seen Wizard of Oz.
You want me to do the voice?
What? I thought I did. Are you a good triple axel?
Are you a good witch or a bad witch?
Okay, that's terrifying. And I loved it.
I saw that movie 5,000 times when I was a kid.
Yeah, fair enough. So, I've only seen it a few times, and I can't do the voice.
Are you a good witch or a bad witch?
It's really...
Yeah, the vibrato on that.
Yeah.
I'll get to Skate Lig at some point, I promise. I know you're heavily invested in this. Anyway, so... But, because there's no natural kind of these actions, the only standard for whether they're a good version of the action or a bad version of the action is literally just the judges saying so. Right? There's an agreed upon form, and the judges decide if you fulfilled it.
Subjective.
Right. And that's it. So in other words, social facts, right? Why is it illegal to run into the convenience store and stuff your pockets full of candy and then run out without paying? Because we decided it was. And that's the puzzle of deontology. The way in which deontology suffers even more than virtue theory in terms of figuring out how to justify saying certain actions are right or wrong. Virtue theory, at least, even if you get rid of Aristotle and Christian virtue theory and all that stuff, at the very least, if we're right that there is some kind of core human experience, there may be a natural fact that there's a better way to be human. Right. But for any given kind of action, trying to figure out why it would bear any sort of moral properties is truly a conundrum. Because you would have to, if you wanted to take the same route, for that, you have to say, well, what's the essential nature of this action? It's like, well, I don't know. And a lot of it's going to be instrumental, right? A lot of actions, like it's the essential nature of this action is to hit the ball as far as you can, and the further it hits the ball, the better it is. That's fine, but that's an extrinsic relation, and moral properties are supposed to be intrinsically valuable. So. Deontology is even more screwed than virtue theory in terms of these epistemic and ecological problems. Okay, any questions? No. But she doesn't sound sure of that, so do you have any questions about whether you have any questions? Again, the look.
Just keep talking.
Okay. Just keep talking, just keep talking, just keep talking. That's a Finding Dory joke.
Which they probably will get.
They might get that one. You might. I'm just going to keep labeling all of my jokes, calling them out, because that's a running joke. Anyway,
jogging at best.
It's a power walking joke.
At least it's not a mole walking joke.
Mm. You know things are bad when they even miss the mole. All right. Okay, so how does deontology resolve these epistemic and ontological problems? The classical solution, of course, the paradigmatic classical deontology, is divine command theory. Why are these actions right and wrong? Because someone with moral authority told us they were. Right? The Ten Commandments, right? God says, don't wear embroidered jeans, don't wear socks of different thickness, whatever. I don't know what they are. Thou shalt not pirate anything until at least a few months after it's been on TV. Whatever.
We do not advocate any illegal activity.
No. Not officially. Not
in a recording, dumbass.
For legal purposes, I'm not advocating piracy. So anyway, now, why does God have the moral authority to tell us what's right and wrong? That's just a presumption. That's a given within the paradigm of that divine command theory, right? Certain things are assumed in any system. You have to assume certain axioms, and so the idea that God has moral authority, is this going to go on camera?
If you want, it has nothing to do with anything.
Let me yes, of course.
The hat's on backwards.
Yes. This has been Sheriff Hellboy says, don't pirate movies. And Sheriff Hellboy has moral authority, so don't pirate movies. That's the one commandment. The two commandments, don't pirate movies, and never grab the reins of another man's horse. Anyway, there's your, okay. But you see what I'm talking about. In any given paradigm of theorizing, you assume certain things, and within the context of Christian divine command theory, it's paradigmatic that God has moral authority, and he can tell you what is right and what is wrong, and so that part is that's an axiom. That's an axiom of that paradigm, and you just run with it. Now, how does this solve anything? Well, one of the ways in which it solves the epistemic and ontological problems posed by deontology and how an action can bear a moral property is that moral properties are obviously not physical properties. We can't detect them through any physical means. And if they were social properties, they would be hypothetical and contingent rather than categorical. So the presumption is that the goodness and badness of it exist in some kind of spiritual sense, and we can't directly assess that. We don't have direct access to that. I don't have like a third eye that can see into the spiritual realm. Maybe some of you do, but I don't. But God in the Christian paradigm, God is, again, axiomatically all-knowing and would therefore be able to tell which actions bear this special property that cannot be detected by our physical senses, and then tells us. It's basically like giving us a heads up, right? Like, hey, guys, you can't see it, but that thing you're doing is totally bad. I thought I'd let you know. Now, it's a little more complicated than that because there is a debate about whether it has the moral property because God gave it the moral property or because God just noticed the moral property and told us about it. But that's a whole other thing. We talk about that in my philosophy of religion class. If you're interested in the Euthyphro argument, take philosophy of religion. We're not going to get into that.
I love the Euthyphro.
I know you.
A whole paper on the Euthyphro.
I know you get a whole paper on the Euthyphro. It's very interesting. But we don't need to get into that to understand Deontology, which is our primary focus. So, divine command theory solves the problem of epistemic access to the metaphysical property of moral goodness or badness by just saying we have an intermediary. Someone who does have epistemic access to it, or plausibly would, and who can relate that information to us. Okay. The rest of the video is me smoking in silence. Now, any questions so far?
Yeah, do you expect anyone to believe that you would actually do anything in silence?
Hurtful truth. Hurtful because true? I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there. All right. So what do we think of this response? Well, there's a lot of metaphysical buy-in, just like with Aristotle's virtue. Aristotle's virtue theory only works if you actually believe in this entire complicated teleological theory about the proper function and purpose of everything in the universe. And it's just not something that's going to get a lot of traction with modern people. Divine command theory works fine if you're willing to buy into all the metaphysical assumptions, like there's a all-powerful, all-seeing, all-benevolent being that can and will pass along moral knowledge to us, can and has passed along moral knowledge to us, and that we're acting correctly so long as we act in accordance with what we've been told is right and wrong by that being. That's a lot to buy onto. Again, this is kind of like my last example. It's like, hey, well, you can buy this thing real cheap, but first you have to buy this other huge expensive thing. The theory, in other words, doesn't stand on its own. You'd be like, here's my theory of right and wrong. I'm like, okay, what's your theory of right and wrong? And you're like, it's whatever blurb says it is. And I'm like, okay, what's blurb? And you're like, well, no, just tell me if you believe in my theory of right and wrong. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I believe in your theory of right and wrong because you haven't explained any of the most important parts. What is blurb? How does blurb know what's right and wrong? How did blurb communicate right and wrong to us? Right? There's a lot of, basically, at that point, the moral element of it becomes almost trivial. If you can get down, if you can sort of take in all of the arguments about the existence of God and how you know what it is God wants and how God would know whether things are good or bad and all that stuff, at that point the moral theory is just a trivial portion. And oh, by the way, God says this and this. You're like, oh, okay, fine. Once you've done all the other stuff, right? Once you've sort of taken all that in, the moral element becomes almost a non-factor. So this is a lot of metaphysical buy-in, and it also underscores the fact that moral theories, which are supposed to be universal, categorical norms, right? It's a moral theory that isn't going to be convincing to anyone who doesn't already buy into that. So it serves not very well at all in terms of creating a community of moral discourse, where people of differing opinions can get together on what is right and what is wrong. It's almost entirely useless for that, in fact, because there are people don't agree on this. on the existence of God, on what particularly God wants, or Allah, or Buddha, or whatever the hell it is, the flying spaghetti monster, whatever you believe in. I mean, even just within Christianity alone, there are so many flavors of it. It's just bonkers. I attended for 8 years a Church of Christ school, and among the various things that they believed was that it was a sin to use instrumental music during worship. They were very firm on this point. It wasn't just something they didn't do like traditionally. It wasn't a tradition in the church. They actually believed it was a sin. And other people disagree. And I'm not here to arbitrate. I'm just here to point out that it's not like there is a Christian moral theory. There is about 100,000 of them. So it's not clear exactly whether this clarifies anything. Divine command theory, I don't know. There's a lot more to take in that isn't immediately sort of presented in the moral theory itself. So that may be a dead end for us. It works if you're already on board, and if it doesn't, no one is going to be able to convince you of it, probably. Are there any other solutions? Well, there are two. One of them, Kant's solution, is incredibly ingenious and very hard to sort of get your head around, but once you get your head around it, it looks incredibly simple. It's like a weird, like, magic eye thing. Like you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it, and then you can. You're like, oh, how did I not see that, right?
Do they still have magic eyes?
I don't know. I don't know if you guys will get that. I could never see anything in the magic eye pictures.
I could.
She could, because she's special. And better than me. And all of us, really. That's our new moral theory. Magic eye morality. If you can see magic eye pictures, you're morally good. If you can't, you're morally bad. How simple will it be? So simple.
Yeah, I can't see that going horribly off the rails in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah. No one would lie and misreport what they saw. All right. So there you go. So that's it. Like, write a paper on magic eye morality. No, I'm kidding. One of the two other ways to try to answer these epistemic and ontological problems is Kant's approach. We'll talk about that in a separate video because it's going to be complicated enough that it requires its own thing. The other one is natural law theory, a naturalized deontology. This is very similar to the naturalized approach for virtue theory, which said, look, if there's an essential human nature, maybe we can just say that the thing that you should rationally want, that every human should rationally want, is to be the best human they can be, and if there's an essential human nature, there may actually be some fact of the matter about that, the best way to be human. And so it's a categorical, intrinsic value, pow, morality, boom, we're done. Okay. Again, though, because of the disanalogy between deontology and virtue ethics, the naturalization attempt, the attempt to ground deontology in nature rather than something else, does not go nearly as well. In virtue theory, the attempt to naturalize ethics turns on whether there is an essential human nature. We're asking, what are the virtues of humans? Well, those would be the things that would equate to mean the best version of a human. And if there is an essential human nature, then there is some... We can leverage all of the theoretical equipment that Aristotle laid out without having to take on his teleology. Fair. But we're not talking about essential natures. We're not talking about arete or perfection. We're talking about rules. Which actions are right and which actions are wrong. And so we can't leverage any of Aristotle's mental equipment, so to speak, for this. We just have to try and figure out, is there some way to look at nature and figure out whether an action is right or wrong? And that's like saying, what flavor is the number 6? It's not. It's a category mistake. It doesn't. It's jumping from one kind of thing to another. You're not saying what's the best way to be human, because even without teleology, there might be a fact of the matter about that. You're saying, is it wrong to eat shellfish? Look at nature. Shit, how is that going to answer anything? This doesn't help us. How would we know? Like, what are we going to look at? Like, what's our comparison case? What, do we say, do other animals eat shellfish? Well, okay, maybe we could, but some do and some don't, right? Do other animals kill? Yeah. Is it wrong to have sex outside of marriage? Other animals don't get married, so yes, maybe, no, possibly, who knows? Maybe marriage is wrong? I don't know. It's not very helpful. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be looking at. This is why these arguments, it's against nature. It's just not right. It's against nature. These arguments are very stupid. I don't, like, what am I supposed to draw from the lesson of, it's against nature? What do you mean, sir? I mean drive-thrus are against nature. I've observed ferrets in their natural habitat, and ferrets do not have drive-thrus. Ferrets are a part of nature, therefore drive-thrus are against nature. Thank you, Billy Joe Bob Hickface, for your insightful moral analysis. It's not... Are we supposed to be looking at ferrets? Are we supposed to be looking at what humans were like prior to society? Like, is that it? Are we supposed to go back to caveman? Is this why people are on the paleo diet? What's happening? Is it a moral thing? I don't know, man. What is the natural behavior of humans? Why would we think that's good? Morally good. Where do we get that? We can't leverage the idea of an essential human nature because it's not what we're talking about. We're talking about actions. Naturalizing deontology, the best known attempt was probably Thomas Aquinas in the 12th century, who attempted his natural law theory. And he proceeded from, he had probably the best, he made probably the best natural law argument, and even that one is pretty weak. So that doesn't say very much for natural law. But his mode of theorizing was that whatever is morally good for us is not going to be bad for us on a practical level, and vice versa. That it would not be, if something would lead to the extinction of the human race, it's not going to be morally good.
That's a low bar.
I think so. I think that's a very low bar to clear. And that's why he also said, sort of vice versa, that things that are good for us, that help us prosper, are probably morally good. But prospering...
What does that mean?
Right, what the hell does prospering mean? Now we're kind of back into eudaimonia and arete and perfection and excellence and being an excellent human, and I don't know what prospering would mean. People can argue about that. Does this mean just having more humans? Or does it mean having happier humans? Or having humans that are able to do stuff? Does it mean a higher concentration of pizza arcades? There used to be more of those in the 80s. Society is morally degenerated by that standard. There are fewer pizza arcades than there were in the 80s. And if that's our standard of morality or a flourishing and prosperity, then we're disappointing somebody at this, probably me. Although the pizza... I'm resentful that Chuck E. Cheese won the pizza arcade wars. I liked Showbiz Pizza.
Shakey's was the best, and they had a great sundae.
I never had Shakey's. They didn't have them in the South. We had Showbiz with little animatronic bears.
Yeah, I've done Showbiz.
You've done Showbiz. We had Showbiz. Chuck E. Cheese. I don't know where that dirty rat came from, but I'm pretty pissed that he won because my 10-year-old brain remembers Showbiz Pizza as being really good, and surely my 10-year-old brain would not lie to me. Yeah, clearly. Where were we? Chuck E. Cheese. Pizza arcades, right. Although there's one in Gatlinburg, but don't buy the last slice of pizza they've had sitting around for hours.
Oh boy.
Friendly advice.
I told you not to eat that.
I was hungry. Nothing else was open. What kind of tourist trap doesn't have 24-hour restaurants? It had a Denny's. The Denny's wasn't open 24 hours.
All I know is the pizza looked like plastic, and you shouldn't have tried to eat it.
The pizza tasted worse than plastic. I've gnawed on plastic before. And this was less good than that. So, anyway. Chuck E. Cheese. Pizza arcade. Natural law theory. So, but assuming that we're willing to grant Aquinas the idea of whatever contributes to human prosperity is probably morally good, he was able to wrangle out a few things like rules against murder, rules against lying, general kind of public commonweal kind of goods, rules, things that are good for the commonality. He was able to wrangle some stuff out, but that's like been the best natural law theory, and it's still a pretty implausible one. It still hinges on this whole idea of human prosperity. I'm not saying that's a dead end, but I'm saying there's a lot to be done on that end, and I don't know, I think like minor variations in how you parse that are going to wind up with wildly different natural law theories. So that's a problem. But the biggest possible problem for naturalizing deontology comes from Hume. David Hume, as always, is here to jack things up. He rode into town to jack up epistemology with his questions about induction, and he rides in to moral, normative ethics to jack up any kind of naturalized theory with his what is called the is-ought problem, or the naturalistic fallacy. Obviously, from the way of saying it, you can hear it's going to be on screen. The is-ought problem. Okay, now, I'm going to put a simple little syllogism up. Cats are warm-blooded. Warm-blooded creatures are mammals. Cats are mammals. A implies B, B implies C, A implies C. Law of the excluded middle, or not law of the excluded middle, but anyway. Point is, one thing I want you to notice about this, I've written this on the board several times during the semester. One thing I want you to notice about this is that every term that appears in the conclusion appears somewhere in the premises. Let me put another one. Let me wipe that one out and put another one on screen. Cats are warm-blooded. Warm-blooded creatures are mammals. Cats are felines. This is a non sequitur. Even though it's true, the conclusion is true, and all the premises are true, the premises do not give you a reason to believe the conclusion. It is not a valid argument. It doesn't matter that everything I said was true, the argument sucks. Because the argument provides no reason to believe the conclusion. Why? Well, even though we haven't done formal logic in this class, the technical reason is still probably easy to grasp. That is, felines has not been mentioned or defined anywhere in the argument. Nowhere in the argument has there been any discussion of what the hell a feline is? Okay, so.
Number one lesson of all philosophy, define your terms.
Yes, define your terms. So, yeah, in order to get a conclusion in a valid way from an argument, every term that is in the conclusion must appear in the argument. This has long been understood as a principle of deductive logic. Everybody knew this. But what Hume pointed out was a bombshell. Let's suppose our conclusion is murder is morally wrong. And I'm going to try and use natural law to sort of build up my case through observations. Natural law, naturalizing deontology is supposed to proceed by observing nature. Right? You observe nature, and you look at what happens in nature, and then you make moral conclusions. So you have a bunch of is sentences. You just have description sentences. It is the case that, blah, blah, blah. It is the case that, blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. It is, it is, it is. You observe. You can already see where this is going, maybe. Murder is morally wrong. Includes the phrase morally wrong. Which means morally wrong has to appear somewhere in the premises. In other words, it is impossible to take a bunch of neutral, empirical, non-moral observations and get a moral conclusion. It can't be done. I cannot look at the world as it is and say, these are true facts about the world, and then get a moral conclusion. Because it would be invalid. There would be no moral premise in the observations, and thus I am not entitled to include a moral term in the conclusion. The only way, Hume pointed out, the only way to get a moral conclusion is to spot yourself a moral premise, or to be able to detect a moral property in nature. But the whole reason why we're going through this absurd exercise in the first place is that we can't detect moral properties in nature. That was the beginning of the problem. How do we get epistemic access to what actions are good and what actions are bad if we can't detect the goodness or badness of them with our senses? They're not physical properties, and they can't be social properties, or they wouldn't be categorical. And that leaves out everything we're able to detect with our limited senses. What Aquinas was trying to do was say, well, let's look at what we can detect with our limited senses about the natural world, and we'll just derive moral conclusions from that. And Hume is like, you don't get to do that. It is a logical fallacy. You have to spot yourself some kind of moral premise. Like, for instance, what kinds of actions promote human flourishing are morally good. That's a premise. And there's no independent reason to believe that. Aquinas is like, I don't know, sounds good to me. Doesn't it sound good to you? Sounds good to me. Let's run with it. He just runs with it. He says, you want to try this exercise? Run it out the flagpole, set it out on the scoop, see if the cat laps it up? You know, whatever, right? Whatever stupid cliche you want, right? He says, whatever promotes the flourishing of something is morally good for that thing. And then you can get a bunch of empirical sentences like humans flourish when they're provided with plenty of burritos. Humans flourish when they get lots of sleep and have access to Netflix. Humans do not flourish when streaming services release episodes weekly rather than in a block. It's morally bad. Whatever. You can make a bunch of observation sentences about empirical matters. But unless you give yourself that bridging premise that gets the moral term into the premises, unless you spot yourself that, you don't get to make a moral conclusion. So there's no way Hume dropped a bombshell into natural law theory. There is simply no way to simply look at nature and figure out right and wrong. That doesn't happen. There are all kinds of people that go, well, I've developed a moral theory just from looking at nature. Those people have not read philosophy, because this is an intro class, and I'm telling you about this problem. And other intro classes cover this problem. If anybody is out there, if you buy a book from some would-be guru who's like, there's a very simple way to tell what's right from wrong, just look at nature, look at the world around you. Horse shit! It is bull! And they did not, they slept through their philosophy class. They have no idea what they're talking about. This was in the 1700s, Hume said this. So they are at least 300 years behind the damn conversation, and you should not listen to them. They do not know anything of value. All right. Hume's is-ought problem, the naturalistic fallacy, is a fatal flaw for attempts to naturalize deontology. Can't be done. And classical divine command deontology requires, it requires assumptions. Like, think of it this way. Divine command requires, all right, assume an entire moral philosophy. Okay. Here are the moral rules. Once you've got me on board with the first thing, the second thing is like a no-brainer. Yeah. Naturalistic deontology, natural law theory, there are moral laws encoded in nature. Natural law theory is like, assume at least one moral principle. Less onerous, less vastly burdensome. You don't have to buy into a whole theology. You just have to buy into something maybe very general, very small. But you still have to assume it. Nobody's proved it. Nobody's demonstrated it. You're still assuming it. And, maybe you can be like, I'm willing to run with that. That's okay, fine. But strictly speaking, it's not cricket. So, but it's still a step. It's a step better than divine command theory. And you might be asking, why would Thomas Aquinas, a.k.a. St. Thomas Aquinas, the great Catholic theologian, not be doing divine command theory? Well, he recognized that divine command theory was limited, that it was, hey, it's only convincing to people who are Christians. And Aquinas was very interested in ecumenical conversation. He wanted to demonstrate that there was a moral law out there that could be intelligible even to people who weren't Christians. He was on board with the idea that, hey, we can have conversations about morality where, we include people who are, Muslims and Jews and pagans and all kinds of people, and they can recognize proper morality because they can assent to a very logical and common sense moral principle, and then natural law just gets them everything else. Okay. Admirable. And his theory still has a lot of influence. But, again, it requires an assumption. A smaller assumption than divine command theory, but an assumption nonetheless. Hume demonstrated that unequivocally. So how do we is it possible to have a deontology that doesn't require us to either assume an entire religious philosophy is true, or just make some assumptions that we can't prove? I mean, some people are comfortable with a certain level of just assuming shit, but we're philosophers and we want to believe things for reasons, not just because it makes our life easier. And it would be nice if we could get to a normative ethical theory where we don't have to assume anything, where we can just make an argument that shows, hey, this actually is a categorical intrinsic value. Boom. And Kant believes he has that way. And it is super impressive, I gotta tell you. It's hard to get the hang of it, but once you do, you're going to be like, that's easy. That was a Monty Python and the Holy Grail joke. And that was the power walking joke. And that was the joke about the power walking joke, or the running joke, as you might prefer to call it. Anyway, any questions?
I feel like I do, but I don't know what the hell.
She's playing your role excellently. She said she feels like she does have questions, but she doesn't know what they are. She knows you. Here in her heart. All right. Like, share, and subscribe. No, I'm just kidding. I don't give a shit. I mean, you should subscribe because you're in the class. Please remember, I'm not holding your feet to the fire about deadlines here. We're just taking it one day at a time. It's a very stressful and difficult situation for all of you, I'm sure, as it is for me, as it is for the cats who have all fucked off the bed, apparently, I guess. Whatever, that's fine. Please take care of yourselves. Prioritize that. Watch the videos. Watch them several times if you need to. Discuss them with other people in the discussion boards.
Please, he needs attention or he's going to wither.
I miss you! I need the attention. I'm an extrovert. I'm one of those weird philosophy people who is an extrovert. Most philosophy people, oddly enough, are introverts. I'm not. And without my audience, I mean students, I'm withering here.
I cannot give him all the attention he needs. I have to sleep sometime.
Exactly. So there you go. So I just now I know how Socrates got started. I just wander around the apartment complex going, does anyone have a philosophical question? Does anyone think they know something?
And we all remember how that ended.
Yeah, we all remember how that ended. Hemlock Express, baby.
You still got that life insurance?
You all heard that.
Just curious.
At 12:55 on April the 8th. You all heard her ask that.
Look, I'm just saying, if you're going to provoke people into killing you, I want to know if I'm going to be okay.
I'm going to start a philosopher's bar called the Hasty Hemlock. Maybe. Anyway, take care of yourselves. Be well. Please use the discussion boards. We don't have another reading just yet, because the next stuff is on Kant. But read it like before next week. And I'm going to try and hold some kind of real-time session, like on Discord or something. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. On Thursday, several people have told me they can't make it to the time I proposed. I'm on a different schedule than I was, but I could maybe get up earlier on Thursday and do it at the usual class time. If you guys are free then. So please comment on the discussion board and let me know if you are free on Thursday at 1 p.m. So, okay. Have a good day. Be well. Take care. I miss you all. And happy philosophy, I guess. I mean, that's an oxymoron. All right. Bye.